This river valley in western Honduras was occupied by the Maya from perhaps 500 BC to just about 800 AD. One of the intriguing facts about the Maya is that within a fairly short period, a very complex civilization ceased building their large palaces. They stopped recording dates and histories on their stelae. They stopped creating their beautiful polychrome potteries, their jade carvings, and their population dropped by 80 or 90%. And one of the things that we're here to study is not only how the civilization grew in this valley, but also how and why it disappeared.
Jim? Did you ever get these floors painted? Looks like it's painted red.
Doesn't that look like paint to you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. What I'm just saying is it coming off the floor, or is it just a result from
I don't know.
A mural that may have fallen?
See, it's right. See how it's in the corner?
Yeah.
It could. Yeah, obviously, it could be either one.
I would suspect that before the floor.
Before a painted floor sounds real strange to me. When people came here in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and even at some sites today, people go to a site and they immediately descend upon the center of the site, where you've got all of this sculpture and all of these fantastic architectural arrangements, and they dig that stuff. And they say, okay, here is what Maya civilization was like. But clearly what you have is perhaps a depiction of the way 1% of the population lived. What it would be like describing or trying to explain American civilization from excavating the Rockefeller House compound or a Kennedy House compound. You've got to get out into areas like this and even farther out and look at how the great masses of the people lived and where they lived and how they made a living and what sort of organization was involved in their exploiting of the local area in order to determine how the rich people got to live the way they lived. Yeah, you can see it in this one too.
We're trying to determine what social groups of people lived in different kinds of structures. So we're interested in the status differences as reflected in the artifacts, the kinds of architecture that they lived in, the decoration of the architecture, and things like that. It's more of an anthropological approach than has been taken before, where we're interested in how the people actually lived and what the power relationships were among the people in this particular valley.
What Sanders is doing here, as he did in his Valley of Mexico survey, is he's doing a 100% sample of the area. That is, instead of only sampling 5% or 10% or 25% of each site, which is what is really common in most operations, we're excavating 100% of a number of different house compounds of different levels.
What we should get just in this one unit is the complete spectrum of occupation in all of the smaller units right down to the lowest. And then when we do test pitting in all of the mounds we find on survey, we'll be able to pin down all of these things in terms of occupation and probably have the best settlement system data in terms of chronology and in terms of a representative sample that we have from anywhere in the Maya lowlands, I hope. It'll take 4 years, but we'll get it. The headdress on the monkey? That's an idea. We can try.
No. The head on top.
The head on top of that. What do you think? No. No.
I was thinking for a second.
That's the trouble. These things become like giant puzzles.
Well, this appears to be an activity area we came upon. You can see a combination of the monos and metate fragments that were used to grind corn, possibly cacao. They're not that very different from some of the manos and metates that are being used today in some of the villages outside of the valley here.
The reason that we collect all these little bits and pieces of pottery and chipped stone and whatnot is that they're keys to some of the questions that we're trying to answer. The pottery, for instance, can be used to date, to indicate social differences between households, to indicate influences in terms of trade from other areas. The lithics can also be used as a means of dating, to discriminate between social classes, to determine some of the activities that may have occurred at some of these sites.
Look what we got here, Phil. Look at all these kids doing. All this stuff coming out.
Jesus Christ.
It's all over. There's about 5 more pieces still on the wall. The head
Yeah, that's amazing.
sits on the shoulder.
It's on this.
It does. That comes right off of that.
We got those other tassel pieces the other day. And you know what that, see the monkey head?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same as the altar in front of the steeple at the end of the Great Plaza. It's just exactly the same thing. I don't know what this little piece is on the right. I can't figure
These
it out.
are all coming out of here, right?
All falling out of that one trench. Half a trench.
Yeah.
Just rolling out.
Let's see whose head will fit on that one.
Color.
Okay, so that's tumbling down off. Well, sculpture does keep on going, doesn't
It's
it?
interesting. In this unit, we found absolutely no sculpture.
Well, we did right on that line.
One of the problems and also one of the advantages to the excavations here is the sheer volume of material that we've retrieved. We're talking about, from any one of these excavations, 2,000 or 3,000 pieces of chipped stone, perhaps as many as 100,000 or more little tiny bits and pieces of ceramic, all of which have to be cataloged as to its original provenience, sorted as to type, and stored away for either ongoing or future analysis.
Most of the artifacts that we're finding are pretty well known. Ceramics, lithics, manos and metates, pieces of sculpture. We more or less know what they are. The problem, of course, is there are different types of ceramics. Utilitarian ceramics, polychrome ceramics that may have been used in rituals, small bowls that may have been used as serving vessels, large storage vessels that may have been used to hold water. Those things really won't come out until we start analyzing the sherds and putting all these pots back together. And then once we've established what type of vessels they are, we can infer what type of activities they may be associated with. And by placing those activities in conjunction with the structures, we can find out perhaps what some of these structures were used for. And then eventually we'll be comparing this with other excavations that have been done elsewhere in the Maya area to see what similarities and differences there are.
One of the problems in this area is understanding Maya settlement pattern at the time of the maximum population, and also understanding the process of its growth and then ultimately its decline. Why perhaps 30, 40, 50,000 people vanish in the post-classic is one of the key problems of this area. And so I think the best approach to answering any of these questions, why you have a certain type of settlement at its peak and how that settlement evolved and how it declined, lies in the nature relationships between peasants and the land they're using, the kind of agriculture they practice, and the problems of adapting to a particular environment. There are a lot of theories about the decline of classic Maya population. The explanations range from disasters like earthquakes to ecological deterioration through mismanagement of land resources to diseases in the human population or in the plant population. Migrations brought on by warfare and other social factors, revolts against the ruling class, with the peasants moving out of the area and so on. So that they're endless speculation, but we really don't have that much data. My favorite position is that there was a gradual process of environmental deterioration brought about by intensification of agricultural practices and mismanagement of land, but there are a lot of colleagues of mine who don't believe that, so it's still up in the air as to what causes it. The drama of it is quite obvious, though. You're talking about millions of people who disappear over 200 or 300 years. And obviously something very serious went wrong with the system, whatever the reasons were. The evidence we have from the settlement survey is that the middle formative population, that presumably were the first farmers in the valley, settled where the best agricultural land is, which is the flat alluvial plain along the river. Even up through part of the middle classic, you find them living near the good agricultural land. And I suspect that most of that land at that time was in subsistence crops. That is, was used to support that population. But then what happens in late classic times is quite interesting. First of all, the population increases by a substantial amount. Probably doubles and triples over a period of only 400 or 500 years. We see increasing evidence of social stratification, that is, class distinctions developing during that late classic period. That's when much of the massive palace architecture was built in the main group. And what I suspect happened was that the best land was taken over by the upper class and increasingly turned into cash crops. The same lands that grow tobacco now were used for cacao in late classic times, and this forced the subsistence farming into the hills. So that by the end of the late classic, probably most of the subsistence crops were being produced by people living in the hilly flanks of the valley, and most of the good land was probably under the control of the nobles and being used for cash crops. And this must have triggered the disaster that I'm talking about. Once they moved into those hills, then you have the process of massive soil erosion, possible massive soil erosion. The valley was resettled around the middle of the 19th century. Right now it's in a phase of rapid population growth, and we have about 14,000 people living in the municipio of Copan and about 12,000 in Santa Rita. In other words, nearly 30,000 people. And this is getting close probably to what the levels were in the middle of the classic period. And so at the present rate of growth, we should see the same effects on the landscape that the Maya experienced within the next 30 or 40 years. It doesn't matter whether these people here are new populations or old populations, or whether they speak Spanish or Maya. They're still facing the same environmental problems as the Maya did, and so you don't have to go up in the hills looking for Indians. You can go down here and talk to these people and get all kinds of clues as to what the Maya settlement pattern means and how it relates to resources and what problems they may have faced in cultivation, as long as there's no striking change in agricultural technology. And a lot of these people are doing the same thing the Maya did. They're clearing the patches of woodland up here with machetes and axes. The Maya used stone axes, but it's the same basic problem. And then they're setting fire to it, which the Maya did. And then they're planting with a pointed stick, which the Maya did. And they're weeding by hand, which the Maya did, and then harvesting. So what difference does it make whether they're modern, recent occupants of the valley or not? It's irrelevant if you're looking for the way in which the Maya adapted to the environment.
The intent of the excavation is to recover the prehistoric material remains, which, because they're deposited in a patterned way, allow us to draw inferences about Maya civilization. But the only way that you can reliably draw conclusions about these is to tie them to something occurring in the present that we know about. And since we have here a situation in which the subsistence economy has remained to some degree unchanged over 1,200 years, we can study today's subsistence practices. We can look at contemporary farmers. We can look at their houses. We can look at their tools. We can look at their farming practices and see if some of these patterns that are visible in the present are similar to patterns that we see in the prehistoric archaeological remains. And if there is indeed a similarity, perhaps we can assume that there is some similarity in the behavior which created the patterns.